to do, but also plenty of time for some good reading, whether it's on your lone vacation or by the pool or just sitting out on your back porch listening to the afternoon showers. Now, over on the Good Things Facebook group, I have asked you to go ahead and share with us what is on your summer reading list, whether you've already completed it this summer or maybe you've got a few books left to go. You can also share with us your titles over at 601-879-4395 on the C Spire text line. And I got one that you might want to add to your list after we talk to the author today, Miss Jan Lemon. She is the author of Letters from God, and she is also a professor over at Mississippi College in the psychology department. Is that correct, Miss Jan?
Yes, that's correct.
All righty. So now I'm thinking, I got a psychology teacher writing books. That may be something that I need to read. But I love the title. So Letters from God. Just set the stage for us. How long has it taken you to complete this passion project?
Okay, this passion project took me about 10 years. I was in the public school system as a school counselor, and then finished my PhD and moved into being a counselor educator at Mississippi College. And it was at that time that I began to think about writing this book, and that just kind of grew in me, and I began to work on it. And, little things would come along and stop me from completing it. And then about a year ago, I just had a really strong sense in me, get this finished. And so I just got on it, got it finished. TVN published it, Trilogy Publishing. It is a Christian fiction novel, and I do think it's something people in Mississippi would enjoy this summer.
Well, and I do that, and I love, too, the fact that it is Christian fiction. We have many Mississippi authors here on Good Things that write from the gamut. And I think, though, maybe, and there's many that we've had that are faith-based writers, so to speak, or faith is intertwined into their work, if not just in their life in general. But I don't know if we've ever had one that has a tale of romance, suspense, and the supernatural power of God on the cover. Why is it important to you, Jan, that there's more fiction opportunities out there for, Christian authors, but or also just Christian fictions?
Well, let me say this. I know, and again, I'm a psychology major, and so you can kind of see that all through the book, little glimpses of that. You'll get that. But, Freud said that storytelling is the entrance to the soul. Metaphors, storytelling, things like that we can hear stories and read stories, and without even really thinking about it, it affects our soul. That's why it's really important what you read and what you put into yourself. So this book is full of God's love, God's power, supernatural happenings that show that there really is a parallel universe. And I think that's one thing I wanted people to know more than anything else, is just as there's this temporal realm, there's also an eternal realm, and there are many things that are going on in that realm all the time, just like in our realm.
Well, you've already got me kind of interested in picking this up and sort of reading it. So let's talk about the characters, because obviously we have God that's going to be a main character in your book, Letters from God, but there's a romance. So, that can go many different ways. If you think about it, the Bible is one big love story. It's probably, the most complicated love story that's out there with the best ending ever. But tell us a little bit about some of the other characters.
Well, the main character is Father Jake Duran. Well, he was not a priest to begin with. He was a law student at Ole Miss, a lot of Oxford environment in there, and atmosphere, and he was rich, on his way to being married to a beautiful woman who was the governor of Louisiana, so very political, very rich. Something very supernatural happens to him, and he is totally and completely changed. He sees God for the first time in his life, and I think the thing that you'll enjoy the most is the different type of prayers that are in the book that are so heart-wrenching and so authentic, because it's the only way that people in the book knew to pray. It was the only way Jake knew to pray when he got into the situation he got into. And so, of course, he's a main character in the book. And as he changes his life and becomes a priest, there are other characters in the book also. His family is very close to his family, very close to his father and mother, but his father is not pleased with his turn in life. And so there's a constant presence of God in the book, where you suddenly feel the presence of an angel, where you suddenly know God is there and he's doing something special. And then it gets a little political in a neat way, because
I don't know if I've ever heard it put that way, politically, and getting political in a neat way. So you got my attention with that one.
Okay. Well, there's a world organization that gets involved, and this world organization comes in and begins to tell the religious people in Louisiana what they can teach and what they cannot teach in their church. And so that gets exciting, and Jake gets involved in that. He is eventually arrested because he goes against what he is told to do and does what God tells him to do. He receives a letter from God with some very specific information in the letter, which is very powerful, very powerful. And so he shares the letter when he's told not to do that in his service. And he's arrested. He calls on his best friend from Oxford, African-American, All-American football player who's now an attorney in Jackson. And he comes to save the day at the trial. And there's another love interest that gets involved toward the end of the book, who is a reporter trying to prove he's a fraud, who eventually sees what he has to say is the real truth.
Man, that does sound like a page turner, Jan. It also sounds like maybe art imitating life, life imitating art, or I don't know which. It feels like it could be a story written in today's times for sure. So 10 years ago, though, our world looked completely different when you got inspired to write letters from God. What inspired that? Where did this sort of story, the storyline, sort of the thread between the book sort of come from?
Well, that is fascinating, because at that time, like you said, I did not know where we would be now in the world. I didn't know some of the things that were going to be going on. But I was just simply led by my heart and my spirit. I have no doubt about that. And so I think that's why this last year it was get this finished. This needs to be out there now. Why I felt that push. But other than divine inspiration, it's really difficult to say where all those different aspects came from.
Well, that's so interesting, too, when you talk to a variety of different authors. They all say it hit them one way or the other, or it came in sort of pieces, but it just felt like something that was inside that had to get on paper, whether it ever got sold and became a New York, bestseller, or if it's just something they completed, to say that they did. It was like they had to get it out, which it sounds like for you, Jan, that's exactly what it did. And you got it out. So it's Letters from God, a tale of romance, suspense, and the supernatural power of God. I'm curious about the front, the cover. If they're looking at supertalk.fm/watch, I'm holding it up now. It's a very... Well, it catches your attention. How would you describe the cover of the book?
Well, in the book, there is a very powerful angel. His name is Andreas, and that means powerful one of God. And he is not an entity that you want to have conflict with. He is strong. He's powerful. He does what God tells him to do. He's there to protect Father Jake. And so I didn't want the picture on the front. I've had more comments about the picture on the front than anything else. And I didn't want the face to show. I wanted the face to be where you could not see the face of the angel. And I wanted the angel to be something people would pay attention to.
Well, you definitely nailed both of those, Jan, and we want you to stick with us. We also want you to send in what you're reading over the summer, 601-879-4395. We've got more with as well. We hope to be taking care of all of your summer reading plans this year. I think summer is just the perfect stage, Jan, for people to get to those books, whether it's on their e-reader or they're listening via audiobook. You know, our schedules seem to slow down. We look for something good by the pool or by the by the ocean. And this seems to me to be the time of year more people start asking for those book recommendations. And we're encouraging people to read yours. It's your first novel, right? Letters from God. And it is a Christian fiction book. So I want to go back and just talk about why it's important to have Christian fiction versus, not always just having the devotional or just always going through and trying to learn, because you can learn and still grow in your faith through these fictional stories versus just always having to be, in scripture learning mode, if that's fair to say. So from your perspective, how do you help someone release that of just always reading the good student thing to also being able to have fun in the fiction world in their Christian reading?
Well, I think just like children, as adults, we all learn differently. And, we're always teaching teachers, okay, you need to interact with this child on a certain level, and this child you need to teach this way because that's the way they learn. And the same way with Christians, we all learn differently. And so to have, faith-based books that are very straightforward and you do this and do that, and here's the scripture, and they're wonderful and you can learn from it. But then you pick up a Christian fiction book, like my new book, and it is so filled with the essence of God. I think after you read the first chapter, you just literally feel the power of God. And so something changes and helps you see things differently from a Christian fiction book that you might not from a nonfiction book. So I think it's important to read both and have that for all of us.
I also find it very encouraging that there are more platforms and Hollywood movies coming out that are very faith-based driven. Number one, it's family friendly. But the number two, it also shows that the same storylines can be just as entertaining and can be just as moving. And you're right, you leave entertainment, whether it's from reading it from a book or watching it from a movie, and you think about those characters and you put yourself in their shoes, and you still can walk away learning something or seeing it from a different perspective, even if the characters aren't, it's not a biography.
Well, I remember the first time you watched The Gladiator. You after it was over, you felt, I've got to be better. I've got to do better. Oh, this man is so noble. And so the same way with Father Jake. I mean, he is noble and steadfast all the way through, even though there are issues there. And so you draw from him and you draw from the other characters. And then there's actually the presence of the Word of God all the way through, and not necessarily thus saith the Lord, but it's still there.
Who is this a good book for? Obviously, anyone who enjoys reading, but who would be like your ideal, this is for you by the pool or on your back porch or wherever it may be, you're going to really love this?
I think anyone who is seeking God right now. If you're in a position in your life where you are seeking truth and you are seeking God, I think this would be a perfect book for you to read. Of course, any Christian, but even non-Christians would enjoy reading. The story in itself is exciting and different, and so I think even non-Christians would enjoy the book.
Have you already got difference, coming out with sequels or next steps or characters morphing? It's funny how things do. You finish a project and you're like, oh, I'm done. It was like having a baby. I never want to do it again. And then you're like, oh, maybe one more time.
You feel that way. I was like, but the way the book ends, it leaves Father Jake in a situation where you feel like,
no, you didn't.
I've got to write a sequel to this. And plus, the character is so powerful, you could write one after another, just his life in general.
So you mentioned that the main character, Father Jake, is steadfast and noble. You had to have somebody in your life, or at least even if it was a fictional character like the gladiator, that maybe helped inspire that character in terms of their moral values and just how was that someone in your life or someone you needed or?
Well, I think I've always been so close to God, even as a child, that God himself was such a part of, and Jesus, of who they were and what they were. But I will say the character is named after my son, Jake, who is now grown. And I do think he is a noble, good, kind, wonderful young man. And so I do think that entered into it.
I feel like he'd be handsome and good looking.
Oh, he's very handsome. Let me tell you, I've heard some of my friends that have read the book said, "Oh, I just love him. I love him." Yeah. And so, yes, he's handsome and he's charming, very charming.
We're already putting it into the future for you, Jan, for this to become a motion picture. And so I'm curious, who would play Jake if you had to pick out of?
Oh, that is so funny you said that, Rebecca, because I've thought about that. And I really couldn't find the right person because I kept thinking of actors my age. And I was trying to think, I've got to find somebody younger. And so, I think that would be a real task.
Well, you mentioned the gladiator. My mind went straight to, yes, Russell Crowe. Like, I don't know if Father Jake would look the same as in a gladiator uniform, but
no.
but still, obviously, come back to earth, Rebecca, come back to earth. If we want to get it and read it, is it in all formats, Jan?
It's at Barnes & Nobles and at Amazon.
And that's Letters from God. That is
Yes.
A tale of romance, suspense, and the supernatural power of God with Jan Lemon. So do you have, a website or social media or anywhere like that we could follow you and see when something comes out next?
No, I don't have a website yet, but it is something I'm working on. It's funny when you start these things, then you say, got to have a website, I've got to do this. And, of course, have an email address, but janclemon@gmail.com. And so the website will be coming soon.
I think it's interesting that you chose Oxford as the backdrop for your book, considering that you got your PhD from Mississippi State. I mean, is that something you had to wrestle with God? I mean, he just pull you to Oxford right out of Starkville?
No, my son went to Ole Miss. He got his MBA there. And so while he was in school, we bought a condo there and enjoyed the beautiful town of Oxford. And sometimes when you're going to graduate school at Mississippi State, you're just buzzing in and you're buzzing out. And I really didn't get to enjoy it like you would if you were an undergraduate student.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed watching the dogs make it all the way through.
Absolutely. Go Bulldogs. I think they're doing an amazing job. We'll be watching. Well, no, I've got to teach tonight.
We don't say that out loud. Don't lie. No, I'm just kidding. Say you'll DVR it, or in fact, you don't have to do that. You just stay updated with any social media or news outlet here in Mississippi.
Doug will be DVing it, and he'll be watching it.
They will have it play by play, and in fact, that sets the stage for